Just as a recap from the first video, because these are taking me a while to get out, taking my sweet time playing this one. First off, this isn't really Austerlitz. The French launched an attack on the first day and punched their way up here at high costs in terms of losses. We've got them at 28 losses to only 11 for the coalition. This is not good. And the initial coalition plans were actually more complicated than what I usually do. Instead of throwing all my forces up on the ridge and getting them there as soon as possible, I made the error of having one command come in down here, which is really unlikely to come in, and they still haven't. And I had a complex set of attacks based for the entire left wing to come around and march up this way. That no longer seems to apply, so Kutuzov is going to be spending the night trying to give orders that work better for this new situation where the French are occupying the heights again. And I hope that I get Langeron's force in at some point. But also, you know, all my orders about moving up to here, this was the culmination point. So I've got to worry about, well, how am I going to position things? Because what I think I can do is cut off here. Now, the French are already taking countermeasures for that by flinging the Guard and Oudinot's Grenadiers down to defend the Pratzen line down here. The terrain on the ridges is not all that advantageous in this system, at least under the version 3. I don't remember if it was terribly advantageous in version 2. Sitting on an elevation change is helpful, but there's a lot of high ground that's not an elevation change that it looks like the fighting is going to be over. Yeah, and some people, after seeing the initial, are like, the map. Yeah, I know. It doesn't look bad over here, these blues and greens and whatnot. It's that orange and, you know, the dark colors. And, it's very functional, though, and you do kind of acclimate to it a little bit. Obviously, I would prefer something like the old TSS white and tan map to kind of cover this. I think that would actually work just as well, or almost as well. There's less, you're able to really delineate the elevations nicely in this, though. And the color differentiations make it very easy, unless you're completely colorblind. But it, you know, I don't find any place where I'm like, oh, is that color the same as this one? You know, and I have a little bit of blue-green problems, but very little. And yeah, we'll start the second day, or we'll start the evening preparing to the second day. This will probably take about 2 more videos to do. The first day was relatively short, although I interspersed it with a lot of crap. I had some questions about the night orders and basically said, well, you know, since the rules as written allow you to discard orders at any time, although I'm kind of backing away from that and not too happy with that, I do think that it would be reasonable to be able to discard orders when night falls, and just fall into a default defense or no orders, depending. Well, I found I had intended to look this up, but I found the night rules here, some of them. Any engage order that's to be implemented at night turns must be rewritten as a number of independent orders that must be accepted individually for each division in the Corps. These orders must, of course, conform to the Corps' old order. I'm a little iffy on this, the must be accepted. It's like, does that just stop the orders? But then they might restart them a little later in the night, maybe have a dinner break, whatever, order some pizza. I don't know. During the command phase of the last dusk turn, any corps currently under engage orders must rewrite these as a number of instantly accepted, okay, independent orders for each division following the corps' old order. None of this really matters because there are no corps, the units, none of it matters in this situation because the units that are under orders are essentially under divisional orders anyway. The one thing that you could kind of say is weird is, well, the G5 is sort of attached to the Imperial Guard, so now they'd unattach the Imperial Guard division. They'd unattach and both have the same orders. Well, okay, whatever. And then would they be able to reattach come nightfall, come daylight? I don't know. Like, that's not covered. At least that I'm aware of. But yeah, all the coalition forces are on individual divisional orders, as it were, anyhow. Even Bagration's right wing is treated as a division for all purposes. So the Knight doesn't change anything here. Okay. There is a problem with movement at night, though, which is this getting lost rule. It's possible that units will not find their way if they're not on a road. That's going to impact these guys. They have orders to make it down towards here. Actually, I think towards Gross Hesterdick instead. But the idea is to free up this force. They could end up bumbling around on the hills, and that's fine. Yeah, you know, even under full moonlight, it's hard to find your way around through through terrain. You just don't have the visibility unless, like, you could triangulate on the lights and whatnot, and there's probably not the kind of familiarity with the terrain to be able to work that way. I've been lost out in the wilderness. Well, not complete wilderness, but lost in positions like this, where I could see civilization, but wasn't sure which part of it was where I was supposed to go. It's not trivial. Okay, I rolled the orders so far, except I'm like partway through when I decided to look up the night rules to see how they were going to work. But yeah, we got an acceptance over on that 3L, so they're going to be bumbling around now. And that night movement, some of it went okay, but these guys turned around and went the wrong way, which might be fine, because now I can hook up to the road. These guys, and movement is decided by your enemy, wandered into the French camp, and they're like, oops. I don't know if you can force an attack this way. I wouldn't be shocked if you could. I didn't see anything that seemed to disagree with that. Whether or not I'd want to do that, again, I'm not sure. Because Seoul is not in the best of shape. But, you know, weird shit like that tends to happen. All right. And we'll be on to the French turn. Again, you know, the day is done. I sleep fucking 11 hours, whatever. The turn, I'm ignoring these poor buttheads. I don't know what to do about them. I can, you know, I'm aware that they're there, bumbling around in front of me. But if they want to attack at night, let them. The check-to-stands are horrible at night. If I get an option to, I probably will. French, Napoleon issued a quick set of orders to his headquarters, and I'm not writing them down. I know kind of where he's going to go and plant himself, which is going to be somewhere over here. He has to check to see if he bumbles around too. Cav has to be really careful. Moving along trails, they pay 2 points per movement. But if I move off the trails, it's risky movement. I might wander off anywhere. So sticking to the roads. And I forgot to move these guys. This is interesting. So I looked up I was counting on doing initiative with Francis and Alexander under the rolls, and they have to go with a 0 initiative rating, which gives them 11 to 14 and a 66. 11 to 14 loose cannon, 66 for initiative. That's pretty bad. It's very likely that any roll orders that I write will be not in my favor. I look back, version 2 was worse. I think it was a 66 for success, 11 to 25. This is 2d6 rolled as sort of a base 6 percentile, basically, if that makes sense to you. You're rolling 11 to 66 rolls, right? Okay, that's significantly worse. But then I looked at the version 1, under which those kind of orders were expected, and they're actually, on a 2 you lose cannon, on a 12 you get initiative, which seemed a lot fairer. Like, no one would really, except maybe in the most dire emergency, possibly roll for these leaders to do anything, which I think takes some of the fun out of the situation. I don't know if I want to twiddle with that a little bit and try to even it out, or just play with these rules and say, you know what, you will never do it voluntarily. The only reason you would do this is off the random events chart. Now, the random events chart didn't exist, if I recall correctly, back in the previous versions. That's something that's added. So therefore, these guys would just never issue any orders. To me, they were always kind of an interesting option, right? Back in version 1, at least, which is apparently the rules I was playing under to use this. So I may not have had Marengo when I first got this. I may have started with this and played this a couple of times under version 1 rules. Because I definitely used them, and it's hard to get lucky, but I felt like it was necessary, and that I didn't really mind overnight if my opponent wrote me a loose cannon order, if it increased my chances. That may be the case over with Bagration. Give me a little bit of time to use Kutuzov elsewhere. That was kind of exciting. They did stumble into St. Hilaire there. It ended up a firefight, not a clear victory, but the French caused more casualties than the Russians, and it could happen some more. They're just lost up on the hilltop. Meanwhile, the rest of the forces, these guys are traveling along the road. All of these, I was moving them 3 hexes, figuring, it's a little risky, but okay. Yeah, that's too dangerous. You got to go 2 hexes or less in the unsafe terrain. All right, let me get the French moving so I can bolt Napoleon down with his headquarters where I want him. It's going to be a big gap leading up to him, but it's not really, there's no impact to having your headquarters overrun, really. It gets flung back, which might be inconvenient, but no big deal. Okay, the French continued moving their forces. Napoleon's pretty much where I want him, so doing night movement, and could have wandered across the stream or something without noticing. He didn't have enough movement points, probably. This kind of screwed up my recovery effort over here. It's 2 hexes is the limit. You can't, under 2 hexes away from the enemy, you can't during night. So it wasn't too big a deal, but, and let's see. There was something else. Oh yeah, I'm moving this army supply wagon around. I realized I didn't bring the Russian army supply wagon on. I'm gonna just ditch this. Use a general rule of if you aren't surrounded, you're fine, because it's kind of goofy. There's no rules for capturing it. There's basically no rules for wagons in the version 3 game. So screw it. It will abstract its way away from the enemy. It's really unlikely that anything too horrible could happen to it. The main thing is this would be a thing that you could surround or take out, and therefore cut the artillery supply of the army significantly. But I don't think that anything like that's going to happen. Quick stab across. Yeah, but I can't see it. That's the whole thing. Okay, well, for the Russians, I've had a couple of shots where they got a random event come up in the last couple of turns. Same one, cav recovery. They haven't lost any cav. Remember, there hasn't been a whole hell of a lot of fighting. What is intense for, well, for what I'm used to from the CWB and the older system. But this system is more intense, and that's definitely a factor to keep in mind. Forces, Buxhausen's forces, and who else is playing up here? Doktorov. They're having real problems with the night movement, like walking off the wrong side of the road and shit like that. These guys have started wandering away. I'm going to make sure they don't attack next time, but might end up close to the enemy and having to slam in with 2 bad rolls, so we'll see. What else? I guess that's about it. On a life side of things, I keep wanting to just retire, just say fuck it, I'm done. But had a headhunter contact me yesterday, and so I sent my resume and said, yeah, I'm interested. And then I had someone, I had forgotten about this. This was the interviews for Meta, Facebook or whatever, that got back to me. And I'm like, I had been putting that aside because I thought, all the work I would have to do to learn. But she sent a link to the actual types of questions that they are. They're a lot easier than I thought. And I'm like, well, I guess I gotta formulate an answer. Now, for most people, you would just write off hey, I looked at those. They're good enough. I actually think I can face these. I was panicking for no reason, or whatever they want to say. Yeah, I got a chance to look at them. Let's set this up. For me, I know what I'm going to write. I mean, I do, more or less, and it's not going to mean much. But I'm frozen, right? It's going to take me a day to get up the cojones, whatever, to actually write this email. That's just going to be a couple of sentences saying, yeah, let's set this up. Jesus. I don't know, I mean, that's not laziness, man. It's like this weird kind of locking fear that I just don't understand. It's 10 o'clock, a couple more hours of the Russians trying to bumble to figure out which way is up, honestly. They wander down into the swamp and all kind of crap like that. They can't figure out Rising Hill. You'd think they could. I'm really iffy on this roll. It just feels... So, it's an optional roll, right? Okay. Makes sense. But it feels too extreme. The difference that it applies to the game is just so harsh. To me, my feeling is generally optional rolls shouldn't make a big difference. And if they're really what should be dealt with, the base rule should be, hey, you shouldn't be allowed to move except on roads at night. And then the optional rule would be to allow you to bumble around if you want to try. As opposed to, you can move freely everywhere, and then the optional rule is you basically can't move off the roads. without it being a serious trial. For Soule, he got some orders from Napoleon. Napoleon didn't want to walk around because he saw Alexander get lost on the hill as well. Couldn't find the campfires in front of him, whatever. You know, you should be able to say, hey, get me to those nearest troops of mine. They've got fires, you know, I can see them. Yeah, it feels extreme, you know, not being able to figure out which way is up, not being able to figure out where your troops are that have lighted fires. It's getting a little crazy. And you know, I don't like discarding the whole role because, yeah, there is a difficulty at moving at night, especially if you're not, you know, riding around trying to get to other troops or anything like that. And they try to make some contingencies to help ameliorate it, but they're just not sufficient. You can see the French line is almost completely formed up. I've got some artillery that has to trail way far behind because trails are not particularly fast movement. And of course the Cav, for some reason, really hates trails, but I need to use them at night. Like normally you just ignore them and move through the terrain and just say, well, I'm not on the road. But yeah, at night I didn't want to end up wandering into the Russian camp up here or something. Kutuzov has given his orders to Bagration and Bagration. I don't know. I always run into this. And I've listened and I forget. And yeah, these guys are heading up the hill. Milodorovich needs new orders because he distorted his. We also have an order distortion here that the High Command hasn't learned of yet. Once I learn of that, I can issue new orders for it. I like that role. I like that part of the new rules. You know, overall, I think they do a great job. I really do. They're just a lot of work. But then there's some stuff around the edges that it's like, you know, I bet you if a version 4 came out, because this is really what happened. Version 1 came out, it had a lot of rough edges, some straight corrections, etc. Every time Dean does a system, the first edition is kind of rough, but it's going to be a series. You know that. And you're like, well, even if it screws up, the next edition will clean up a lot of those issues. And it used to be you got a yearly newsletter that would give you all the errata, etc. That's less important now because of the interwebs. Used to also come with a counter sheet with corrections, and that's less important. Well, that's just as valuable now. I guess you could print them out and whatnot more easily than you could back then. But they're starting to plug them into later games. They did this long ago, and then they started coming out with the yearly, you know, Christmas welcoming gift. And I really liked those. Those lasted for about a decade. And then now they've been putting them back into the other games of the series. So like I've got, you know, I opened up the most recent OCS that I got, Third Winter, and it's got pieces from all kinds of things in it. And that's confusing and everything. I mean, it's great. They're probably not major fixes. And the other thing was, you used to get a whole bunch of stuff. You'd get a half a counter sheet, basically, they'd print. And it would be, you know, if you were into CWB and NBS, you're like, well, what's all this other shit? You know? And then there were also like vanity counters in it and stuff because they had extra space to print. So in a sense, it's kind of, I guess, for the best that it's not there. But it was part of the stuff that made the charm of the old Gamers company, which kind of doesn't exist anymore. It's folded into MMP. Gamers is just really a branding that says, you know what, we're not going to have the kind of, what I've seen so far to be crappy quality control on MMP games in general. Rules aren't well hammered out. They don't have the same series standing that gamer stuff did, so you don't know that you're going to get a better game eventually. And I mean, it's not everything, but now I'm really terrified because I picked up The Greatest Day there, which was an expensive thing. It was on sale, but I didn't realize it wasn't. It was Multi-Man and not the gamers. It's part of a series that sounds like, let's see what they say, Grand Tactical Series. That sounds like it would be a gamer's thing, right? And I'm like, okay, let's try it. It's not. It's designed by Starkweather. I've run into a couple of things he's been involved in either designing or developing, and I'm not impressed with the final products. I don't know anything on this yet. I think the whole package, if you get all the boxes, once they eventually come out, is basically The Longest Day redone in a more modern type of design. But I'd trust a whole hell of a lot more if it was a Dean Essig design. 11 p.m. Langeron finally makes it onto the map. Meanwhile, I'm performing what seems almost like Brownian motion going on around the hill. Yeah, it's a little directed, but not terribly. It is such an annoyance rolling these. If it wasn't such an irritation, it would just be funny, but it is really obnoxious trying to move this way. And it's not like it cost me anything. So, you know, if there were fatigue rules in the game or something, you just wouldn't move at night, right? Unless you absolutely had to. But here I'm bumbling around and everything, and maybe it's indicating that, yeah, troops are camping out and whatnot, not really following the orders, but it's just an obnoxious mechanism. Far too random in some cases. You know, I leave the road hex and I might leave it in the wrong direction. You think you know left from right and north from south and everything. They have compasses. They have the stars. They should know better. Move to December 2nd. A few things change. First of all, the order distortion is detected, and Kutuzov wants to just leave things alone because Langeron and Kleinmeyer between them have orders that kind of work together. And rather than try to change the orders at this point where they might not take effect, I'm just going to let them go. These are orders to go sweeping up around through here, but I'm okay with them. I am honestly okay with them. The only thing I'm really worried about is there's no road between these, and taking telnets, I may have to wait until dawn to start doing that. That's okay though. Or else blunder into it and take it. The lines here are starting to form up. I've got some lost artillery that's trying to make its way home. And then finally Bagration is undertaking his orders. And rather than just blundering cross-country, I'm working my way onto the roads. Now some of the units are blundering about a little bit. Question, of course, is any of this visible to the French army? I would suspect so. They're on the top of the ridge at this point. So I'm going to allow the French to react to that. Yes, it's not in line of sight, but there's lights and movement, and there'd be scouts and everything out there anyhow. You don't know how much, you know, under the hidden movement rules, you'd be able to move in hidden movement this way. How fair is that? Do you think an army is going to move without lights? I just don't buy it. I don't buy it. So, you know, some of the places where hidden movement seems like it's a good idea, yeah, but the distance is just not that great, and the sound and the number of troops involved in moving, the lights that would be involved in everything, I think there's a fair chance of of detection. I could roll a die, but you know, there's no system for that. I still haven't done the recovery rolls for the coalition this turn. I slept and rested all Saturday, and now here it is, Sunday morning, I guess, a little after midnight. And I played out a one turn just to make sure that I am kind of keeping up with things. We've got Langeron's column coming into a range where it's going to trigger the AGL movement. In continuation of the movement here, I'm rolling a die to see, you know, if the French are aware of the abandonment. I gotta know, so I'm not gonna write orders for them. Sure, I moved up onto the Kirchfeld, but that could have been done in a kind of careful manner, I suppose. Though certainly there was a lot of noise because troops are, you know, wandering around, blundering about, etc. But I like the idea of seeing the surprise factor, so I would rather keep this hidden. This would be absolutely hidden under the hidden movement rolls. So I figure not reacting is probably more likely, so I gave them a 1 in 6 chance to get a reaction. Had they done one, I don't know what it would be. It would be, you know, sliding down. But right now, these guys are going to position themselves so that they're able to do a nasty flanking maneuver on the French. The inability of the coalition forces to really change their plans, whether or not you play with that special option. Using the original rules, Kutuzov's 0 rating means he can't even really write orders to 1 unit per turn that are likely effective. His sub-commanders are not good. I can't rely on initiative to give me an additional bonus using Francis or Alexander. They're just there to fail initiative checks. That's one thing I like about the option is now it, like, you know, creates more opportunities where you have to make die rolls for initiatives all over the place and everything, just to botch your plans even more. I don't like that those leaders are almost ineffectual at this point. But I also don't think that I'm in a position where I can implement that kind of grand strategy. And in fact, you know, I'm keeping the orders that these guys had because it's easier than writing new ones. Anyway, I figured I'd come up, grab a turn because I had to grab something up here, and why waste a trip up? Dawn is breaking now. You get a, still not a very good, a 1 hex visibility, which is not enough, but you know, whatever. The AGL has captured Telnitz. This second Langeron's column has captured Skoltenitz, or at least discovered it's empty. Started their movement up. These guys are supposed to move along the west side, which now that it's light enough, they won't get lost anymore. Dawn is when all the action is supposed to start, but honestly, it's a little tough. I unlimbered some guns here to try to open up a pathway, but at 1 hex range, I don't see anything yet. Likewise here, these guys have, well, I forgot to check, Milodorovich still hasn't accepted his orders. So he had the distorted orders. I had Kutuzov go and clarify them for him, but I think I got a couple of checks on there. He has not yet gotten them. I've been giving chances for the French to discover that Bagration has left here. They have not, which is to say Napoleon hasn't gotten a chance to write orders. So this is the situation we have as dawn breaks. I honestly don't know that I need to begin the attack motions in all cases without the possibility of softening up with artillery. I'll figure that out, to what extent I want to allow that or enforce that kind of action at this point. I didn't realize we were only going to see one hex away. I thought it would be a couple. It's really still pretty damn dark out, I guess. But yeah, that starts to clear up. There is a fog as well, which is part of the problem, and that's going to come into effect here, where it's only in the lower areas that are going to be invisible to view. All right. On my own notes, well, blue Saturday off for the most part. Today, Sunday, I was supposed to go shopping. I got some food, and I'm kind of like, I didn't want to waste the effort on going shopping for various reasons. So I kind of spent today watching History Channel stuff and doing prep work on a lot of games as a way of being avoidant. Because honestly, a couple of things that I thought were kind of taking care of themselves, or that I was working towards a solution on, got setbacks on them, and I don't know. I just can't. I can't cope with the minor setbacks that life is just made up of at all. It's hard enough to cope when there are no setbacks. At this point, visibility is still limited. I finished the Russian side of the 6 a.m. turn. It's very hard to believe that the French are not aware of the danger that they're in up here. Whether or not Lannes is aware that there's no enemy to face and that he should march this way with no visible line, I don't know. That's going to be problematic no matter what, right? Because let's say this force strikes. Okay, I'll hear gunfire. I'll know there's battle happening down here. I could march to the sound of the guns immediately. Napoleon doesn't have much of a better clue, though, than Lannes does. So no matter what, if I was playing with the full hidden counters, I guess everything would be hidden at this point, for whatever that matters. But there'd be like pieces on the board, blocks or something like that, to indicate the center of formations, and the deployments wouldn't be very precise and could end up kind of random. They end up really, they're not random, but they end up not necessarily following legitimate movement rules. Also, aligning them with the night movement is a little weird, although it might make more sense to have the whole column go astray than to have units wandering this way and that. So I don't know about that. But anyway, we've got these forces beginning to deploy. These guys up there, they may want to make an initiative roll because their orders are to go up here to Puntowitz, and it's clearly not what I actually want to do. But again, how do I know to make those decisions? It's just it's very difficult to play hidden information. Playing it solo makes it a little easier. I can make shit up about how aware I am and whatnot. But yeah, at this point, I think Bernadotte may be considering an initiative and orders to fall back. Lannes may be considering orders. And then, of course, Napoleon could write orders, but they're going to take forever to get there no matter what. And Lannes got his initiative roll and is starting to move his column down to Blasowitz area and then try to support First Corps in whatever they do. Which honestly feels like more or less what he'd actually be looking at. He hears, he heard forces moving down there. Maybe some scouts are getting him some information of or another, but he doesn't have a hell of a lot. He certainly doesn't have the whole disposition. He's not going to really have a good enough grasp to be able to make orders that are like, well, move up, strike them, strike your way up the hill, then turn and head this way. I don't know enough for that kind of orders, but I sure the hell know enough that, hey, I know First Corps was deployed up here, along with maybe the Cav, and I think it's best if I move over to that position and connect things and give up my defense. And honestly, I feel like, this is the kind of order that I often feel is too vague to support something in whatever the hell it's up to, which may be defense, maybe offense, I don't know, but whatever it's up to. It's that kind of linked order that I used to launch my attacks with the coalition previously in other games of this. So they're the kind of orders that I'm like, well, yeah, just keep supporting that, whatever it's up to. Because I don't necessarily want to continue attacking. I certainly don't want to attack without mutual forces in conjunction with each other. When I look at the orders that are written pre-game, things like this, scout this whole area and defend it, which feels so vague, I'm kind of like, well, gosh, I'm being better than that. But these are definitely orders that I would not feel comfortable writing. By the way, I had been playing that Baseball Mogul. And yeah, I mean, it had me addicted the way it always does. I don't know where I am. I think around 1910 now, so I played like about 10 years of it. It takes a good amount of time to play through a year. It's just such a fucking time sink, and I'm not sure that, like with most computer games, I'm not sure that I'm really enjoying it or whatever. Yet, it's so fucking addictive that I have trouble getting away. And now I'm kind of away from it again. I finished a book, did a lot of counter clipping and stuff today, watched videos, none of which is all that helpful, but like, at least I'm not completely hiding from reality. At least I feel pain more often when I'm not absolutely sucked into a video game. And that's just a spreadsheet game, but it's probably even worse with the sort of role-playing stuff and things like that, where you're getting sucked into the story and everything. I'm just watching numbers change. And, ooh, can I make a trade? Can I make a trade? I feel like I need to keep going, but I'm so scared to keep going. The end of the 6:30 turn, yeah. We had some artillery fire going back and forth here with casualties on both sides, but I found I did something idiotic. Legrand parked his artillery, and basically it was parked here at the beginning and never moved it from in the town. So he's only getting one gun point out of like a 5 heavy artillery piece that he's allowed to even fire. That was a total fuck up, but the fact that it was parked there from the beginning of the game, sometimes you don't redeploy stuff. And I'm just going to put that up to idiocy. We got Lon moving down here, rolled for initiative over there. We took one of their guns out, which was kind of a nice thing. And I sent some orders off to Bernadotte because his chance of getting initiative, I tried last time, his chance of getting initiative is just too low. Basically something like 1 in 12 or so, 64 or higher. And I really need to get him out of there. And I think he can survive for a while with what he's looking at, especially since obviously the coalition's not attacking right away. Hey, that's cool. They will begin their artillery bombardments pretty soon, though, because the visibility is beginning to clear. But one of the main things is I'm taking the coalition has an advantage in artillery in this scenario. At least they have more guns, more batteries. But I think they have more guns total. And, they're going to suck on attacking. This positional advantage might be good enough, but I don't know for sure. And also, it would be these two units that would be attacking. Everything else is kind of contingent on them. Plus, these guys haven't yet accepted their orders, neither the guards nor Milodorovich. And I'd rather get all the ducks in a row if I'm going to launch an attack against all of this. Although, honestly, part of it is just I'm terrified of the Cav fight that's going to erupt up here against Bagration. Boy, does that not seem like it's going to be fun. But I mean, I'm not allowed to charge until I can see them. And when I can see them, they're allowed to gun me. So, and also, and this is actually, there is a rule for this in the hidden movement game. First visibility in the morning is randomized. So you may not, like, the turn order is generally fixed. And so when visibility comes about, it would always be the coalition that gets first visibility. If I was playing with the hidden unit rules, it actually flips that around. I don't know if it changes visibility for the whole day. It changes turn order for the whole day or what it does. I didn't look at it that carefully. But, with this scenario, if you set up an attack like that, on the other hand, I don't mind it that much because to some extent, the coalition knows that they've got Napoleon surrounded here. They're the ones who've taken the aggressive action. They're the ones who are going to be scouting out and ready to fire as soon as they get, some kind of pinpoint. In fact, they might actually start earlier. But that might give them away, so who knows. So now on the coalition side of, I guess, the 7 a.m. turn, I realize how long it's going to take for visibility to get it all reasonable. The fog, etc. Screw it. Getting worried about that. Kleinmeyer got a loose cannon result. Marched back here. He's got no orders now, so I'm not hoping for anything to come around there and get me any kind of advantage. Wondering if Lon is moving. If I forgot to move him last turn or something. It's cloudy, man. But my main issue here is these guys accepted their orders. I feel like I have to go in. So I'm starting to go in, and you can see I form a square because I'm going to get charged. And we're going to have a whole bunch of mess happening here. The artillery fire, I caused another casualty. I don't know if I'm going to press there. There are some advantages to doing so. One is coming in through the city, maybe cool shit will happen, but also, I got a shaken morale there, but I outgun him, so maybe I just want to sit there since I'm able to trade shots at this moment. And Cav to defend that flank, it just didn't work. I had 3 different Cav units, smacked 3 things. They turned into squares, great. 2 of them failed to do a break off, ended up with a repulse, each losing 2 casualties. The French are really getting their asses handed to them. And, to some extent I don't mind. We're in a horrible position here, but to the other extent I expected the Cav to kind of do better than just halt a few of the units at significant losses to themselves. Just ouch and painful, and the huge losses you take when you launch just all at once. So things started out well for the Russians. They marched into here from behind, hit the French unit, routed it. Their own unit, that can't be it. It's got to be something in square. Their own unit actually routed as well. And, you know, both sides took some losses, but it's not that big a advantage to hit somebody in the rear. First of all, they don't check first. Now, speaking of checking first, I was attacking from here. I think in a modern map, this would be uphill from here. I would bet you that the slope differentials would be significant enough. I'm not sure though, because there's only 9 levels of slope here, and there aren't really that many levels in most of the modern, the Talavera era games. So I wasn't willing to give the Russians the advantage of, hey, the French have to check first. But they actually won the battle, great. Then I come over here and they lost these 2 battles. Well, before that happened, one unit came over, hit Bernadotte, and so he gets withdrawn, and there's an emergency retreat being paid against the First Corps as soon as it's the French turn. And that's going to cause some issues, like being in no orders status, somewhat close to the front, and stuff along those lines. But okay. But yeah, here we got repulsed twice. However, the Cav just got blown away. I don't remember if I caught in. I know I mentioned Cav got blown away in one case. They just got blown away everywhere. Basically, there is no secure defense, especially with, you know, my Cav is like B and C morale there. Murat's Cav is the good stuff. It's part of why I didn't want to go up here. I'm facing so much Cav, and honestly, I have Cav. So I held off the attack there. Am I violating my orders? Not really. I feel like I have kind of the choice of going in, although with the engagement happening here, these guys are released. I think everybody's going to go in next turn, but oh God. Over here, I kept the artillery duel going, lost a gun there. There was a gun waiting for me here. That was part of the ugliness. And casualties are way up now. So the French are at 41, but the coalition's up to 22. So they've lost some of their advantage there, taking some heavy hits on those failures. Plus, their attack up here has just, especially this part, has just collapsed. You know, over here it's still valid, but these guys are going to run. And now I'm on the French turn, and I got to try to figure out how to cope with whatever the hell's all going on. Elevation levels in version 3 are 9 to 10 meters each. Okay. That doesn't really help me because versions 1 and 2 don't give that in the scale, and it's not on the key, it's just levels. I don't know how high Bratson Heights is in comparison to what's near it. I don't know how big these elevation levels are meant to be. But as a comparison, the only battle, well, Montebello might have had it, but out of the Spanish ones, well, peninsular, only Vimiero has what looks like more extreme terrain than this, where it might well go more than just 9 levels of terrain. I looked at Talavera and, well, wait, not Vimiero, no, Espinosa. Talavera and Vimiero have terrain, but it doesn't look like it's particularly more extreme than what we're looking at here. I really don't know how big a feature this is. On the other hand, it's really, really unlikely that you'd have a plateau-like feel to things. So given this behind here, this probably was a downward attack. Coming across here is a lot more questionable. This actually, I would suspect, is uphill here and downhill here if I was really tracing things. So the attacks that were actually made over here would probably have given the advantage to the coalition. On the other hand, they had the bigger forces, so they got the advantage anyway. So it really didn't matter. They got the die roll advantages. This was the only one coming from behind, which in a way I feel like coming from behind should probably force it. Should probably force an early check on the enemy anyway, but it's not there. It's just elevation for that. All right, dreading the French turn, man. Turn turned out not to be too big a deal. Mainly it was just running away. You can see I got some guns exposed and stuff. That's going to be problematic. But, hey, we're routing basically. Everybody rallied. That was kind of surprising. Not all the cav blew itself though. But, yeah. And that's it for a little while because I know next turn the coalition has to hit again, you know, one way or another. I'm not sure to what degree, like getting these guns close enough, unlimbering them and stuff like that. That may be the answer. Yeah, now this gun is alive again. It was disordered, which kept it quiet for a little bit. All right. Bring up, because of the intensity of the conflict, and I don't think I've touched on this particular point, but it drags so much of my attention into what I have to do mechanically and everything. Unlike in the Leipzig game that I played, where I'm like, oh, you know, you've got this, you watch it develop and you just sit back and kind of get to really take a view of it. I don't feel the same way with this. I felt the same way about it under the old system. But the intensity of the conflicts, even if it's more realistic, whatever, just the amount of effort I have to put into it, direct so much of my energy to that there's less for me to kind of sit back and say. There's also the simple fact that little square counters compared to those longer lines, even when they're just in one hex like they are in the Viva l'Empereur, they're less, they appear to be less of a line. It's this jagged little formation and everything. But I have to say, I've gotten that kind of experience off the CWB games. I've gotten that kind of experience, I think, off of this particular game when I was playing it at other times. But now I'm just so focusing in on all these close combats and all the, well, there's a lot of interplay under the old system too, so maybe I'm just getting older and crankier. Here we are with a lot of bright light on Tuesday morning in my life. Monday I went for a walk. It fatigued me, just a couple hours, but it fatigued me, and I ended up watching videos and clip encounters, stuff like that, most of the rest of the day. The rest of the night. I don't know. I made an attempt to come up here. I failed. I mean, I came up, but I didn't start. But now here with the bright morning sun coming in, I decide, well, screw it. I can't sleep, as always. So I rolled a random event. Leader lost for the coalition. It was Kutuzov. That means Alexander's in charge now. Now, that doesn't actually hurt much, except that there was a possibility that Kutuzov could become a 3 leader through the random events table. That's gone. Alexander's in command, and he will start acting as the operating army commander, which is no worse than Kutuzov was. There is the possibility if he ends up dying that we get Franz, but it's pretty low chance. You don't usually lose army commanders, which is why it's not that big a deal that there's a rule that, hey, if you get Napoleon killed, you can't play war games anymore. The Lang pushing the Russian Cav forward for various reasons. Not Cav, the right wing. Mainly having to do with Murat's Cav. However, I charged forward with the other units, what could. A bunch of it was disordered and is not anymore. Forgot to upgrade those guys. I have a feeling I'm going to see a Doubleday situation from back there, that these guys come in over there. I just think that they do. First thing was I had to deal with an artillery piece that was positioned here. So I charged into that, took the canister, didn't break, and I also launched an attack on this unit from behind it, which strangely enough I don't see any morale effects, but okay. And unlimbered my guns here to start pummeling the French position. On my next turn, on the French turn, I'll be able to fire these if the French don't get out of there. And if they still don't get out of there, even this one will be able to fire. I couldn't move any closer with this one because there's some cav there. And had I moved into a range where the cav could see me, I could get attacked. I also landed on a couple of guns and sent them routing. That caused some disruption. But the biggest thing, I blew away the one unit with the guns. It ran away. I also routed, and yeah, that can happen. Doktorov here launched an attack behind that unit, ended up just getting a firefight out of it. Casualties have gone up some more. We're at, what, 46 to 28? So, it's falling behind that 2-1. Taking the attack is painful. But a big thing was, I stepped on Murat. That means the French Cav Corps has to execute an emergency withdrawal. That's not that big a deal. They don't end up taking stragglers, but it does get them out of my way. They've been the thing blocking the right wing from wanting to advance, so might as well face this guy this way. And now I guess we're on to the French turn. What we got after the French fallback, there was some opportunity fire going on in there. A little bit more casualty. I got another hit here, I know. Don't know where else. When I was talking about a Doubleday situation, what I mean is in Terrible Swift Sword. And this is where, it's stuck. But Doubleday at Gettysburg comes in way out of line. All the Union troops are coming in up here, okay? And Doubleday comes in over here. Now the Confederates come in basically, northwest corner of the map. The Union comes in off the east end of the map for the most part. Might be something a little south. And Doubleday comes in from the southwest side of the map, just wanders into what could be a really dangerous situation. If you knew about it, you could set up and dose him pretty hard. And I think that's the case with, any Gettysburg scenario. I mean, that's where he historically came from. For Dru's division, I can bring him in anywhere on the west map edge, which means that I could create such a situation here. But he doesn't have any orders. When units enter without orders, what I generally take that as is go join the Army headquarters. That will not be an advantageous thing to be at, except that I could out-initiative, who is it, Kleinmeyer down here? Anyhow, other than this unit showing its ass, the French have pulled back. I don't know how much good it's going to do. And again, now we're at 3 visibility, so the Russians have artillery fire again set up. that they can start shooting. But they have more gun batteries than they have targets. Like, here I got 2 targets. This is no problem. I got 3 targets, 2 gun batteries, no problem there. But here I got 3 gun batteries, but I got 2 of them really. And I only have 1 target, and I can't combine them. So, of course, the heavies will fire. But so a lot of the Russian guns, there's a lot of different batteries, but a lot of them are marked down to smaller gun totals or evened out or whatever. Luckily, these charts have all that information on them. The ones from the original game, if they have the artillery on them, wouldn't have that. I think it's just 1 division here. No, it's got to be a corps. Yeah, it's Davout, not Druid. 3rd Corps. Okay. So yeah, that's a whole corps coming in, which is definitely enough to handle both of these. The problem, of course, being I'd have to roll an initiative to clear that out. I don't know that the French are losing. Things look bad right now for them. Yeah, right? You know, I got shoved off the hill and whatnot. But because the coalition's been doing the attacking, they're beginning to even up the casualty score. It's just hard to attack. It's hard to attack in this because it's not a matter of just moving up and trading shots and taking your licks. You go in there and you have a good chance on the close combat table of just straight up losing when you attack because you probably are going to have to check morale first. Even if you're really good morale, you have a chance of just losing. And that was true in the original game too. It's just, in the original version, you didn't have to charge in. You could move up, trade shots. If you had higher morale, you had a pretty good shot at, driving the enemy back slowly. But that wasn't very Napoleonic. My price for doing something yesterday is, and being out and about with people, is that now I'm kind of sick. And even less capable of playing than before. But I did manage to swing in a coalition turn. I'm finding that my orders are kind of a mess. Like this column, the 1L is heading to Pratzen, while this one's heading up to Pontowitz. Not the best planning. The right, I don't remember what the fuck that's doing. Oh, cute, a worm. It's not even a worm. I don't know what it is. Let's not have it on my map. It's disturbing me. Yeah, when you have so many little commands, it's really hard to keep it. He's sweeping down towards Pontowitz and Jerkowitz as well. So I've got like the 2 flanks are heading up this way while the center's heading down this way, and then it's supposed to spin around and head back up. Yeah. I wrote some orders, Alexander did, for the center column. They've just run out of their orders. They basically were to support attacks up here. And honestly, I think the Guard has kind of run out of orders as well. It's basically the same kind of thing. But I moved both forces up. A little bit of casualties, not much. Nobody launched an attack, the orders I wrote for the center were to swing through and smash the rear of this line. And then they have additional orders to spin around and march up to Pontowitz or whatever. Everything turns out to be confused, messy orders. I don't even know. So normally normally you have geographical objectives that mean something. Here I'm just trying to kind of batter the enemy army and kind of guess where they are and whatnot. Because you can't really write orders like, go attack these guys. I finished the 8 a.m. French turn. No, I didn't. I mostly did. Disordered for going into the town. I gotta check these routes. And blown cav. But pretty much wiped out. Almost nothing happened. Wrote some orders for Murat, and Sewell accepted his orders, which basically allowed him to fall back a little bit and take a defensive stance, which is important because if I have any artillery anywhere, which I guess is under this routed unit, I can't fire it, and my skirmishers can't fire until I had such orders. First Corps has not taken its defensive orders yet, which means it's kind of shitty. And let's see, some of the guns for 5th Corps are beginning to come up. I ordered Murat around the flank to help defend 5th Corps because there's a lot of cav showing up over there from the right. Davout is coming in with his 3rd Corps, which is really just one division and some supporting cav. I chose to bring him in here. Could have brought him in anywhere on this side of the map. He has no written orders, so his orders are, I guess, to try to find the army center, and he would have been moving along here, but now we're coming into vision, so we may end up thrown into a no orders situation where he's going to be rolling for initiative to try to get orders. I've been sick since Monday. It's Friday now. I'm not going dancing. I could have gone, but I needed to go shopping last Sunday. I haven't had a chance to do so all week. I felt too shitty. Haven't been able to play. I came up a couple of times and just couldn't face it. And I kind of see why. I did almost nothing, and I'm wiped out just standing here like trying to focus and concentrate. Doing mental stuff with the games, any of it, is just really hard. And this game requires a fair amount of it because of the complexity of the interactions and whatnot. So I'm just more wiped than I should be. I wish I was playing something else that would have been easier to cope with. I almost set something up, but mainly just been watching Lord of the Rings videos. The costs of not being well when I'm doing this, etc. But I decided to come up feeling a little bit better. It's late at night, whatever, and do the coalition turn. And to open up with, the only interesting thing, these guys kind of aligned themselves so that they're better able to defend. They don't have any defensive orders, so I don't know how much it's going to help. These guys are going to have a withdrawal. They've given up their attack, which is why you don't want to go in kind of light, is you may not get another attack off of them. But anyway, that's what I chose to do. I rolled my 2 and didn't make it. Started to press the units of the 1st and 2nd column of what's supposed to be the left corps that was originally supposed to go up this way. 1st is supposed to push its way to Pratzen. 3rd is supposed to push its way up to Puntzwitz and I think Jerkowitz. But crossing, of course, and that's a pain in the ass. But I started moving forward, got halted by a cav charge, thrown into a square, no harm to anybody, basically. Great. Cav's doing its job and not getting destroyed this time. I started looking down here and I realized, oh fuck. Sometime, probably on Monday, maybe it was Tuesday, I don't know, I didn't notice that I had an attack on a shaken group of druids. So I'm going to have to kind of wind time back for that little unit and that could cause all kind of weirdness, but we'll see what happens. Rolling that back, the defense won actually. They had to roll first. They got a lucky 6. The Russians got an unlucky 1, and boom, knocked back. It really was only a difference. They both took a straggler. The Russians took a single casualty, so it really wasn't that big a difference, and I don't think it's going to impact much. Drought, I don't know, is fallen back and out of the way. And he's recovered too, because he would have had time to do that. So we got away lucky on that one. A lot of other things I kind of did out of turn. I noticed that this 3L column here was beat up more than I thought it was. I didn't have it marked as wrecked. Every unit in it is wrecked. So I re-rolled its core attack stoppage. It did not fail. Amazingly, it needed a 10. It succeeded with Buxhowden in command and whatnot. Given that, though, I declared it's halting, throwing itself into, I guess, a default defense so that I can continue firing my artillery. It's not going to be in any position to launch any kind of attacks. 1, 2, 3, 4, it's far enough away that I can recover stragglers, and its guns can be of some use. We have one attack that made it through. The rest of these units were converted into squares by the Cav defense. Basically, the Cav was all over up here, so boom, 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 just hitting them. The Cav did its job. It didn't really hurt anything. It didn't get destroyed. That's good enough. And the other thing that I kind of noticed was, hey, I really need to write some orders for Alexander. So he wrote orders for his army to move, and then ran off, and he's going to go command the guard here. I need to have more force hitting that French force at this point. Otherwise, I'd have to call off the attack. And as it stands right now, I'm kind of at the best I can get. I've got them running. I've beaten them up somewhat. If the center wings follow their orders and the guard and eventually the right can do something, that's great. Otherwise, I'm going to have to give up on the attack. Should I just be giving up anyway and kind of take this as a minor victory? Probably. You know, sit on the hill and let the French come at me at this point. Because honestly, the coalition army is really not in any position. It has no way to win this. It really doesn't. It's so disorganized, such a mess, so many different minor, so many different columns that are under command that, like, it's really hard to take advantage of any situation. Plus, the leadership sucks. Anyway, I got some more units to take care of this withdrawal and whatnot. Doing a full real player turn of this with attacks going on and whatnot is fatiguing. It doesn't look like much of a game, but in terms of the size, but so much happens in in trying to express each movement, each operation. It is just, wow, much heavier than I remember it being. Again, though, under version 1 and 2, it was just kind of line up and trade shots and play it the way I'm used to playing my Civil War games, which obviously isn't right. Anyway, what do we get as a final result? These guys fled. They took some retreat fire, which caused a casualty. The attack in here ended up a shootout, which the Russians actually lost, but, both sides took casualties, I think, 2-1. Right, well, that's probably up for a while. I gotta head myself shopping later today, after I sleep. It's not that late right now, but yeah. Sleeplessness afflicts me. I did the French turn, which is much simpler. The Cav took its orders on, shifted over. First Corps still hasn't taken on its orders. Some of the Cav over here is recovered. Davout is just kind of lost his orders, more or less. I think I can get my forces up here. I rolled for initiative, nothing happened. I could write him some orders. It'd take a long ass time to get there though. So I'm counting on initiative to work for him, which is essentially what I'm counting on here, and maybe with Langeron. Good luck with that though, you know. It's one thing for Davout to be rolling. Langeron's not bad. But when you start getting below a 2, you're really looking at, yeah, I don't know. It's not too likely. I'm worried I didn't move all this artillery back here, and of course the center column either. I'm just going to write that off to the problems of command and control that are exacerbated by, you know, me being in a brain fog and the world, the complexity of the system being such that you end up fucking up things that, you know, you wouldn't be screwing up in a simpler system. And in a sense, it actually, this is something I've brought up with some other games. If you start making things too complex, you start taking away from the accuracy historically because you start screwing stuff up. So like my devotion to figuring out that combat or whatever, and to worrying about all the interplay of the cav and the artillery and everything, it meant that I just kind of forgot these guys. They're not under orders. Is it a big deal? Well, kinda, because now the French have significant artillery superiority up here, and they're bringing more up with the cav-based guns, which means I can't kind of unlimber my guns. Now I could fall back and unlimber, and then I'll be at a further distance when I fire, which is fine. But I got to be like 4 hexes away. And once you start getting that far away, the massed batteries become more important, something that the Russians don't have available to them, because, you know, it just becomes plink shots on the one table or whatever, even if you have a lot of guns at longer range. Of course, if you don't have a lot of guns, you don't get to fire at all. And I shifted that gun out of the town, which was the French equivalent kind of, oops, why is this there? Trying to take advantage of a conjunction of cooler weather, which it's been for a few days now, but it's not going to be very soon, and me feeling well, which hasn't been the case during the cooler weather, along with me being awake during the daytime, which is kind of shocking. Most of the day, I took a nap. I start the coalition 9 a.m. turn, and now there's no mist at higher levels. I don't remember what level that is. I ought to look that up. Below level 5. Level 5 is this ring. So pretty much the fog has cleared through most of the areas where there's battlefield. Here we still have fog. You know, we just came into view of each other. We didn't even know they were there. I'm not sure of that. Because again, there's probably scouts and whatnot blurring out. Not enough to be able to target fire or charge, but enough to tell, hey, there's enemy troops in this area. But anyway, we could have maybe made it further heading up the road until we hit the back of this and said, whoa. But yeah, the fog is thin enough that these guys can see each other now. What do we got? Right. So I rolled an event. I've had a lot of these. This was a reinforcement delayed. Doesn't have a damn effect on anything. But I got a lot of command effects. So I wanted to go over those. First of all, The right hasn't been doing much. I thought it was in some sort of supporting role. It isn't. I don't know how badly I've been mauling things, but they actually have attacks to take Jerkowitz and Puntowitz, so they should be in pretty good. They should be able to activate. I wrote orders from issued orders from Alexander to the Guard to support any attacks into the valley, because that's pretty much what we're looking at now. So I'm pretty much secure in launching an attack from Bagration's right, sending the Guard in to help. Also, both the center units got their orders, which are pretty much to slide around here and attack up. So we're going to have a fairly coordinated set of attacks underway at the same time. I forgot to roll initiative rolls. I got a couple of them to make. So let's take a look, see if we have any orders we want to write. We're allowed to write for these guys. Nope. And then for these guys. Again, it's just going to take so long to get orders down there that... And he's a 2, I think, isn't he? Yeah. 22. Okay. That's fine. The other unit without orders is the one Buxhausen's in charge of, and I have nothing I want to do with that. And then the Cav have orders, but their orders are contingent, and so far the contingencies haven't been reached. Although they might have been able to support these guys. No, they've got to wait until somebody's actually making a clear attack on Puntowitz, which, you know, that's where all the orders were before. They're running on very old orders, but I don't know. Cav is kind of fragile. I like what it does on the defense. It halts the enemy. That's pretty much what I expect. That's what it does in Viva l'Empereur too. It works fine there. On the offense, you feel like it's way too iffy. Like, yeah, if you manage to like slam into something and chop it to bits, it's powerful. But the chances of it doing that are so low, because anything that's decent morale is going to form a square, or even if it doesn't, is probably going to stand, and therefore the Cav will not complete a successful charge at all. So, all right. Looks like it's time to launch these attacks. This is going to be a big one. This is going to be harder than I thought. I just moved this column, which is almost no effort whatsoever. 2 columns moving. Did my initial artillery fire, found that. And just from that, I'm feeling kind of exhausted, faint, a little nauseous. Part of the problem is I'm not used to coffee, and I unfortunately made myself some coffee and am at least halfway through the pot that I made, which is no longer a full pot, but yeah, wow. It's just to show you, I mean, some of it's the illness, some of it's the coffee, whatever, but it just, I did almost nothing. Again, I'm really zooming in on this because this is a big turn, and I just want to catch a couple of things. I've got a bunch of Russian units hitting here. Now let me make sure left wing. Yeah, these guys don't have any skirmishers. I just wanted to make sure. I've got very, very few skirmishers, and it looks like I've deployed them all already. For the first time in this battle, at least, I've been able to launch some attacks in line formation, which should be decent, I would think. However, if we take a look at sort of the important part, which is the check to stand, attacking in line is a -1. which is the same as attacking in march column. And really the most important thing is, do you make your check to stand or not? Now, I don't mind that assault column that the French, that wasn't always a real advantage, right? But that the French closing in column is at least as good as line. But I don't like that for people not using that march column is really significantly not much better than the line. Now, if we take a look at this, big units and, units attack in line actually do less damage when they win. Is that reasonable? Is it not? I don't know. I understand sort of the mass value, etc. But I gotta tell you, the forces that the armies pre sort of the revolutionary attack in, you know, in assault column or whatever you want to call it, combat column, I think they call it, is particularly not what these armies were trained to do. They were trained still to deploy in something similar to the old linear formation, especially the Prussians, but we don't have them right now. But the idea that they would have as good a chance of just marching in column as they do in line, of being able to take the advantage on the check to stand, seems unreasonable to me. The idea of forming in linear, getting close enough to trade those shots, that was the intention, without necessarily marching to bayonet or whatever. So it seems to me that the check to stand for line, there shouldn't be a penalty, or if there is, the attacking in march column should be worse or whatever, because they really weren't trained to operate the same way the French were. And so there should be a greater penalty by going against training, assuming that line is a bad formation for closing and not necessarily bayonet range. We're talking, you know, 100 yards and starting to trade fire shot. Line is not a bad choice there, especially for the English. But now, when we're looking here, column versus line has a particular penalty. Like if the defender's in line, the defender gets a bonus against the columns. And yeah, just being in column sucks for that. Being in column here does not suck. So I don't know. I don't feel like it really adequately. It's really hard to attack in line. And there's almost no additional value to it. There's a teeny bit, right? If I'm coming in a column, I get an additional penalty on the casualty table, assuming, you know, that I fail my stand and the defender wins. Luckily, I'm coming down a hill, though, so there's a lot of bonuses there. Anyway, most of my units were unable to hit in line. I'll push some of that artillery forward and whatnot, screened by the attacks. The right and the guard have both marched in as well. Now, I haven't taken the artillery fire yet, which I probably should have during movement, but because it could cause other artillery fire to happen, so I got to keep that in mind. I might not have some of these gun deployments screened. This gun came into play, and I did a cav charge as it came up. The Russians countercharged it. The French smaller cav unit, not particularly good, chose to redirect their charge at the enemy, which means they're the attacker. They force the countercharge to make the first roll. But it also means I can't continue my countercharge. And that was the only one that was in place. They ended up winning the battle, killing a couple of cav, blowing away without taking anything themselves. So that worked pretty well for the French. But I do have to do those artillery fires to see if they drive the enemy away, because I might have to change some of my movement based on that. Highly unlikely, even with canister, but it came damn close. If I didn't have a leader here, and oh, I forgot to make a leader loss check on him. Okay, because if the leader went, that unit would rout. That was 3 morale hits, raised up because of quality of unit or leader. Well, anyhow, we all made it in, which means all these deployments are fine, because I could set them up coming in a way that wouldn't cause an issue. And I didn't want to countercharge the infantry because there isn't much I could do about the infantry. Like, it probably would just stand and be able to keep marching. Of course, I could have squared it. That would have been worthwhile if they chose to square, but they probably wouldn't, not with a leader and whatnot. So, and they would have gotten hit by the cav anyway, which would have just changed the order of things. Now, one of the things I gotta say is the artillery ammo tracks, probably not worth doing. I did take heavy losses on one of these units. This unit took like 2 losses and a straggler. So, and then the other 2 had no artillery deployed. All right, gotta swap batteries and start handling all these battles, because I mean, I'm just engaged all along the line here. Make sure I actually moved everything this time. This side of things, because we're kind of in a messy situation. I forgot, he might have some fire. Oh no, not, he's low enough elevation they can't see. I know I moved this gun so that, but it's not going to matter right now. So this is the right and the guard. I've taken care of them, and it takes like a half hour to do four little battles or whatever. Maybe not. I don't know. It's painful now. The first 2 hits went really badly for the Russians. They lost both of them, took significant casualties, got routed units over here, I think. Yeah. These guys disordered, were flung back as well. But here we had a success. This was actually one where we did not have the height advantage, too. These 2, we didn't have the height advantage. But anyway, we got a success here. And that was a line extension. So I pulled Cavalry's command. It ran off this way. And we gained ground here. Here we were repulsed, but I think we won the shootout, so I guess that's okay. Got to make a check for Constantine. Okay, he's fine. And now I go to the 1L and do another big set of attacks, 5 more. Clear though, I mean, anytime you launch into this close combat, there's a fair chance that you're going to just wreck a unit on this. So like the Cavalry unit, which line extensions are kind of a dumb idea. You don't really want them, but I felt like I needed it there. It gave me 2 AB units. That's pretty solid because it was a big AAA and I needed to cover the extra space. But yeah, in general, you kind of don't want to do them. You kind of want as big a unit as you can have there. It imparts weaknesses to the line to have the extensions. But anyway, you know, the one hit wrecked the unit, and we have other places where it's pretty close. I'm sure this one got wrecked too. What is that? The P1 right? It got wrecked by stragglers. Yeah. So I mean, it's just really unlikely. If one side or the other wins, the losing side is going to be wrecked. And this is just a very different feel from what I'm used to from like the CWB series, or how this used to play out, because I would play cautiously and stand back and trade shots. But apparently that would be trading shots at a range that was highly unlikely in Napoleonic combat. You really wanted to close and get that mass fire in there. That was part of the doctrine, as opposed to, certainly in the Civil War, once you have rifled muskets, the dynamics change significantly. But you had a fair number of units that did not have rifles, especially on the Confederate side, up until fairly late in the war. So, I don't know. But the system works okay there too. Anyway, it's just, the point is that, like, this attack might largely determine the outcome of the battle. A couple of big units getting crushed is a pretty big deal. It might collapse the flank, it might not, whatever. It is the kind of thing where, like, the impact of this one painful turn will have very far-reaching effects, where it wouldn't under the old system, and it certainly wouldn't under the CWB system. It was reasonably effective. Losses were horrendous on both sides. We're up to 48 on the Russians and 66 on the French. So the Russians actually did a pretty good job there. If you can recall, the French had had more losses already at that point, but that ratio is beginning to fall apart because the Russians are attacking. The thing about attacking is, if you're hitting decent stuff, like B morale stuff with a better leader, or A morale stuff, they're not going to fail. You're not going to win the battle against them. You might win the shootout, though, and that might be good enough. I had at least one case where a shootout was enough to break the attack on this hex. The shootout wrecked units of that 4th Corps, Soul's Corps, that had already been battered badly. And here's the thing. Because there's not another overnight, there's not really a chance to recover these commands that are just wrecked. Druitt took a casualty. I think that's the only casualty I've got, but you can see this was a wrecked unit that won its battle. You can close combat with wrecked units. Anything that's not routed can close combat. And it didn't have to make its check, which meant before the French did because of the height advantage. And that meant we got an advantage going in. That could have caused some issues, but, well. But yeah, we've blown a hole here. Got a little crack here. We slithered through there. We've got our guns deployed, which is kind of a big deal. It means that if the French, well, no matter what, the French are going to take some shots at relatively close range from the artillery. And yeah, I mean, this all is worked out pretty well. Now I go through all the bookkeeping type stuff that has to take place. Recovery rolls. That's about it, I think. I don't know. I am fatigued, though, after doing this. But, this and maybe another turn or two is probably the decisive situation in the battle. And the fact that the coalition is attacking, frankly, if the coalition wants to win this battle, they probably just park themselves up on this hill and say, yep, that's it. That sure ain't Austerlitz, though, right? The question of what to do once the French position themselves up here, yeah, you kind of feel like you got to drive them back. Do I have to have the ambitious goals that I have? Probably not. I probably don't want them. We may see the coalition lose the battle as they try to pursue, because even though it looks like they kind of have the edge right now, God, attacking is just so painful. But as you can see, that height advantage changed things significantly. And, that's one of the big, hey, come get me factors is I'm lower than you. You get that big height advantage on me. And yeah, it turns out to be a huge, huge effect. If there were more contour lines like there are in some of the other battles, this would be significantly more impressive. Again, though, I don't know. We got 9 levels here, so unless this is a particularly significant, unless this feature is very steep, and that's hard to tell. Like, would this be represented differently under the version 3.0 rules? I don't know. Because if it would, it really could make a huge difference in terms of getting that height advantage so that you don't have to check morale first. But, again, solid French units probably are not going to fail their morale check, so you're probably not going to brush them aside. If the French weren't beaten up from pushing their way up here, they probably could have withstood this. Force the Russian forces to make their morale checks, and then they might lose because their units just aren't that good. And no matter what, they're almost always going to have a skirmisher disadvantage. There are just so few skirmishers on their side, and then the French skirmishers are double-sized because they're elite skirmishers. So, yeah. Anywhere where I don't have skirmishers, though, they're kind of weaker. So like this line here, there are no skirmishers for that. That's that's the grenadiers and the guard, which don't have skirmishers. I could shift them, but yeah. And I will, as these units recover and whatnot. They won't be functional units, but they'll have functional skirmishers I can throw in elsewhere. I think I'm all caught up except for the administrative stuff during the French 9 a.m. turn. Starting to be able to fire some artillery fire up the hill. Just a little bit. Didn't do anything. Still nothing over with Davout. He's like, I don't know. I don't know if I can handle this. First Corps executed an emergency withdrawal because it was going to happen anyway. I'd rather have it happen right now. Although that leaves a big gap here. The Cav threw some artillery in the way to try to cover that. And I pushed some Cav here, launched a charge against the Russian Imperial Guard. Seems like a good idea, right? Well, it would have been, because with all this artillery, I would have gotten shots at them if they turned into square formation. They choose not to. It's the Imperial Guard. If they weren't in line, they couldn't possibly fail the morale check. Well, if they weren't in line and weren't shaken. So they had some chance of failing the morale check and getting butchered. They did not. They stood, but in the break-off attempt, they're disordered, and that makes them pretty fucking useless now. They have to be withdrawn in order to recover, and yeah, that's not gonna work well. I think, I may be mistaken here, but I think under the old rules, you automatically recovered everything except routes, whether you were adjacent or not. You could take fire or whatever. You would this is what I recall from CWB at least. that you can recover your morale effects just by sticking around, even trading shots, as long as you don't get further. With this one, though, if you're in close contact, 1 hex, you can't recover. And that's a very different feeling, one where you have to like pull units back, throw other units into the line, have reserves and stuff. I like the effects of that. I think it holds up better. Certainly in the Napoleonic era, maybe units in the rifled era have a little bit of a stronger positioning. But I'll look at the old rules and see if they're the same. But yeah, a little bit of withdrawal around the flanks. Here I wanted to stay in contact because I got my skirmishers up there. And that's 5th Corps, so they're allowed to fire outside opportunity fire. So I have skirmishers and artillery. I'm a little iffy about being here, but if I pull back, I would have given another shot. I'm just not sure. I think I fired this artillery at that anyway. Oh, this unit did withdraw. I think I get another shot. Couldn't it? No. No, I'm pretty sure I shot that. Okay. And yeah, you know, there were some opportunity fires. There's a plink here that I didn't take, though. Ugh. 2 at range much. Not that much. It's just going to be on the one chart. It's so easy to forget, and then nothing happens, you know. I might get a morale effect, but I'd recover it immediately. Basically, I'm plinking for a casualty. But again, I think I mentioned this, the artillery tracks, there's no way I'm going to run through this much ammo. The French are down to under 100, though, right? No. Yeah, the French are down to under 100, but barely under 100. There just aren't enough guns for those numbers to matter. So I can kind of understand why in the later ones they just said, screw it, there's enough ammo. And I think that would be the case with this. I guess over 2 days, if somehow things just all fell perfectly and there were assaults right off and everything, you might push those numbers. I don't know. Indeed, I was right about the rules. It definitely changed. After looking at the old rules and seeing, yeah, there's nothing, I went back and looked at these to make sure there was something. It does make sense, though, and it kind of makes sense that it's different between the 2 eras. Again, you know, what does it mean when you're right next to someone? I don't know. See, that's the whole thing. It's like there's nothing that really shows we just stood there and pounded each other for more than a half hour. But ammo wouldn't really last for that long, right? You had like, I don't know, between 24 and 48 shot. I don't remember what they carried, but they could go through that, you know, in a half hour you'd go through that. So you couldn't really stand and keep firing the way they do. The question becomes then well, when you withdraw to a range where you're no longer in that close combat, does that or does that not mean, you know, if you're not able to be close combating still, you should be able to recover, I think. But it provides, maybe through some design for effect type maneuvers, something a little bit better. You know, I forgot to roll for my blown cav. I got to do that. But otherwise, you can see some of the French units are recovering, but definitely not all. 30 coalition turn, and we have a problem. This is not surprising. Doktorov, whose column is now wrecked, hangs up his hat and is going to do a corps retreat. Nothing new back here. I didn't write any orders. Counting on initiative to try to move these things because they're just so far away. But, you know, there's just no commanders under the under the coalition that are really capable of having a good chance of getting an initiative success. Eventually it'll happen, I guess, but yeah, it's a hard force to command. I figure maybe if the army moves forward, I might make an attempt, at least to pull those units out, because the problem I'm having is kind of a matter of, well, they're going to be in a lot of danger if they're just left stranded out on their own if this whole attack collapses. Now, and that would be historically accurate, that, forces ended up left to their own devices and really not put in good shape. There is a problem with this kind of thinking. So I could write orders for them to withdraw someplace and roll for initiative for them to withdraw someplace not too different. That is legitimate. But you can't, and this is where it disturbs me, you can't write orders that are essentially the same. So there's some fuzziness in here. So like, I couldn't be writing orders to withdraw, to August marked and roll for initiative to go to here, I think. I don't know. Just because they're about the same thing, But you could kind of futz around a little bit and try writing orders that will get you close to the initiative situation. Well, this is going to be problematic. This is the center that was attacking. Now I've got these coming up this way and these coming this way. And the place where I've gained the most ground, I'm falling back out of. During that withdrawal, put a blue here just to remind me that they're eligible for recoveries. There was some pursuit by Sewell's Cav using opportunity chasing. Worked well against some guns, took a couple of guns out. Running into the rear, which doesn't matter at all. The fact that it was in march column. Now, I don't think you can turn into square when you're conducting an emergency retreat. You're essentially routing. And if you're being pursued in that, well, I mean, it's not a full route, but you're required to move that distance. You can't just throw yourself into square. So they had to defend in march column, which gave them a penalty. But we ended up making, and yeah, these are reversed. I've mentioned that before. Artillery is free. Oh, attacked in rear, -2. Oops, I screwed up. I didn't see that. I looked for it, I didn't see it. Okay, so I have to actually do the successful charge, which is going to actually hurt the attacker, I believe. I'll check on that. I've got some casualties to do, and that unit probably routed instead of running away successfully. Well, the coming in and butchering didn't work out very well because of the die rolls. The Russians ended up getting one of the particularly decent rolls, doing 2M with a morale loss that let's change that. I gotta check Beaumont for a loss too. Oh boy. Okay, he's fine. But yeah, I ended up trading 2 cav for 2 infantry, which is probably not a good deal. I would have rather what I had, which was just bouncing off. Sometimes the charge successful can go really, really poorly for you. Yeah. Now, against a big, well, I don't know. The attacker wasn't that big, and it just ended up doing 2 casualties. And it routs him. this was already a defeated enemy who probably can't get moving again. And again, my cav is blown, which is no big deal, but also badly mauled. Really unlikely to get bad results like that when you win an infantry charge, but the cav charge, even a successful one, can end up pretty damn bad. Guard cav gets a much better result here. They used a heavy, not a heavy, but a big cav unit, AA size, smashed into a shaken unit that I couldn't afford to form a square without taking artillery fire with the penalty for square. So I tried to stand, and that didn't work very well because I'm in line, and I get smashed and rout off 4-1 losses. Could have ended up, well, it probably was going to end up more in favor in this case because it was a fairly large unit getting hit with a fairly large, I wonder what this parentheses 0 is about. I think that's a typo. It was much more likely to be successful because it's a big cav unit hitting. The little cav units, that's where the crapshoots are, really. But this was a big enough cav unit that, you know, I'm not going to take more than 2 losses, but with a +2 on the die roll on here, I'm going to get at least 2 losses on the enemy. Plus I rout them, and that's important because that gets me room to maybe get away with this. I'm going to look and see, can I smash that too? Because if I can, this disordered unit can then rally, perhaps. It's a dangerous situation because I'm facing a whole bunch of guns here with guys who are on an active defense. Fucked up, and I don't think I've had a successful cav charge before this turn, so I think we're okay for the game. But I forgot, remembered as soon as kind of I launched a cav charge where? Against these guns. If you succeed, you get to stick around and butcher for 3 more rounds. And if you destroy the unit or whatever, you can choose to push on to another unit. This is important. So I butchered the shit out of the gun that was there. That went down to 1. But then I had to go back and take care of those French charges. And they destroyed the guns that they had. Could have continued on into the unit probably. I'm not sure what the positioning was, but screw that. But then the second one, the one that was close, I ended up doing 1 more loss on 3 rounds of combat on the charts. As the defender got smaller and smaller, the losses got less and less, and I got some really shitty die rolls. So it didn't really work out too much better. Only 1 permanent loss, but I did get like 3 additional stragglers on them. So that unit is really a lot more hosed than it seemed. It was the G31L. I mean, it was already wrecked, but now it's down to a B. Could have been a lot worse. This was a particularly bad set of rolls against it. So, whatever. And I think I would have maybe had another die roll against it from that other cav unit. However, that would have routed it early, so I don't know. I don't know how that would work. And now I'm looking over to this side and seeing, you know, can I extricate this unit? Again, if these guys form square, I think there's some cannons hiding here that I might not want to take the artillery fire because that might be worse. However, getting butchered is pretty damn bad too. Got a charge going into here, and it turns out that there's only artillery and a skirmisher in there, which is one of these special case situations. The way that works is they check to stand as usual. If they fail to stand, They take casualties as normal. The attacker does not roll for losses in combat regardless of what happens. That's interesting. I may have to look up more. The check to stand is going to be a C with a penalty, and that's about it. Okay. So I get a 4, I stand. What the hell does that mean? I think that means a break-off. If they fail to stand the check to charge, the skirmisher can absorb. The attacker does not roll for losses regardless of the result, although any losses and or morale change results suffered due to opportunity fire still arrive. Yeah, so I got blown away, and the stand, even by skirmishers, somehow means I don't get in there, and I took 3 losses to make that charge. I didn't realize what I was hitting, to tell you the truth. And certainly didn't realize what the possible implications would be. So I don't think I have to roll a break-off chance, but there is a chance that, oh yeah, I do have to roll a break-off chance. Okay, this could be weird and not really result in what you expect. So I've got a B morale there. Which means my break-off is a 4. I fail the break-off. That means I'm on a repulse. Now, I don't take any losses. I guess it didn't matter whether I rolled or not. And I roll, and on odd, I cause another morale loss, which doesn't happen. So this was a horrible attack. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. Ouch. I was hoping to blast through that. Continuing this, I slither this guy away, taking some opportunity fire, and I'm going to get more fire than afterwards. I could have taken more opportunity fire. And then march this unit in around, taking opportunity fire and then flank artillery fire, taking a couple more casualties, trying to take these guns out. I really don't know that I can push the right any further. There's more guns here. But there's infantry to defend them. That seems kind of scary. I kind of like the idea. Everything's just, it's so fucking bloody, this assault that I'm undertaking, and probably really, really unwise. So I kind of want to cut my losses at this point. I was doing it all to try to get this guy to recover. Now I've got this guy disordered going in. He's facing skirmishers. He's uphill from them, so he's gonna probably break them, but we don't know for sure. This is not a good situation for that Russian attack, and I'm just kind of losing my willpower to continue the attacks as I start seeing, the cost, the butcher's bill that's building up. I'm up to 63 losses versus 74. Again, the French still have taken more losses, but that keeps narrowing the more and more the coalition attacks. In for a penny, in for a pound, right? So the Russians start a charge here. D'Hauteville, not D'Hauteville. D'Hauteville. Yeah, D'Hauteville. Countercharges. With a morale and a leader, so they're not going to fail. The Russian cav is pretty good too, even though it's facing heavies. It doesn't fail. We end up on a draw. The Russians lose the shootout and take a casualty. That means they didn't win so they can't continue on with their charge, which is probably for the best. They're both pulling back. No leader loss. And before I start dealing with mechanical stuff, the attack here succeeded. I think that's the last thing I had to do. It's really hard. You're juggling so many balls in your head at once. then I don't know. But I took my defensive fire, and I don't think there's anything else, except now I have my recoveries and whatnot. But oh boy, every time there's one of these sequences, you just it's so easy to just forget to move pieces, like I think I've done very recently, at least in terms of game turn times, and just when you start putting this much complexity in terms of balancing out how many things I got to remember in how many different hexes at the same time, to me, that starts making the game really tough. I was, talking about this with the game Carrier. I remember that having this kind of, I had to remember too many things happening at once. Maybe if I wrote things down, it would be easier. And that's just my recollection. This was years and years ago. Whereas something like La Grande Guerre or, Empires in Arms or whatever, yeah, I got to write things down during a particular combat, but I'm doing one thing at a time. It's very, very clearly that I'm collecting up where things get complex. It's within a single hex, within a single combat. And yes, that gets complicated here, but then there's hey, what about the contingent effects of what I'm doing? Once I get to the melee phase, fine. But before I'm there, when I do a cav charge, well, I got to remember all kinds of different steps that, are very contingent on the positioning of all the pieces. Whether there's counter charges, opportunity fire, and all that kind of stuff, in addition to an already, equally complicated resolution system, from my point of view, to the ones in these games where I do have to write things down for the combat, but the resolution's not that hard. And again, I think this is necessary for the Napoleonic. I'm going to give the Labatt a chance again at some point. Just because, is it this painful, and does it still give as good a view? I know that there were things about it that I really disliked, like too much emphasis on costs for different maneuver aspects, multi-hex movement and stuff like that really bugged me. Of course, that applies here too, but I felt, I really think a big part of that is the actual design of the counters, where the information's on one side and it's not the side that's meant to be visible, and you can't even tell whose units are whose. that adds a layer of complexity that there's just no reason for, but yeah. There's something similar here, which is that the morale values aren't on the front of the units. That's not the case with the version 3, and I don't remember. I think even by the time you get to Marengo and Asper Nestling, you can just look with the Asper Nestling. It may not be the easiest thing in the world. Yeah, I don't know where the counters are for it. But yeah, on this original one, they didn't have the information presented as clearly as it could be, which is pretty disturbing, to tell you the truth. There's no reason why it can't be, which they showed with the version 3 counters. The Napoleonic side, orders-wise, nothing new. Napoleon's got to walk up and talk to Bernadotte again, because his orders got disrupted by, his awaiting orders got disrupted, discarded, whatever, because of the emergency withdrawal he had to do. Nothing over there. And one thing I had to do, though, was clean up my order sheet. I had a bunch from the beginning that I hadn't crossed out yet. And the sheet looked like I had as many orders as the coalition does. I'm going to call them the Union side, because they're blue, This, I think, is going to be the last part of this video. It's supposed to get really, really hot this week, and it's going to hit 90 today, but it's going to be up around 100 for the rest of the week. So I think I'm going to take a break from Austerlitz, and there's another one. I just woke up after a recurring dream, which is really disturbing, where I wanted to mock characters in the dream because they were part of a recurring dream. They had pitched these ideas to me before. But anyway, I don't know if that's reasonable or normal. Yeah, so, and I think this video has gone far enough, and certainly I feel like I've put a lot of effort in. And a lot of time has passed since it began. Gotta be careful about some of the artillery in this game is designated as B morale units, and like all of the French, I think, except the Guard, which is A. Normally, artillery is just C morale, but in this, I gotta be careful. I don't know if that was the case in Marengo. I put Marengo away. Okay, I don't know. But yeah, I've just been assuming artillery is always C morale. It is not. It's apparently designated on these sheets, so that's a little different. I think I'm pretty close to done here. One of the problems I have is, like I said, sometimes it's hard to remember what you're doing first and whatever, and this adds to my difficulty. Is, I look at my orders, make sure I have them all. I start acting on my orders, and then I realize, wait, I have to do preliminary artillery. Now, it doesn't really fuck me up because I don't really notice it until I get to places where there's artillery. But it does sort of disjoint me following the proper sequence of play where I am shifting some forces around and whatnot. But it's just so fucking easy when there's so many different things that do get juggled together and so many different steps in the game and whatnot. Especially since I'm used to the artillery fire being part of a fire combat phase that happens after movement and after defensive fire and all that. I'm just, looking at this map, it reminds me, especially this map, which is the old CWB style map with the, as some people put it, magma vomit on it. The layer terrain effects really, blurred it out, especially when there's huge blotches of ugliness on them. It really blurts out to me, hey, I'm playing CWB style game. So yeah, it's really easy to get into the bad habits. I am actually burning through artillery ammo for Napoleon. I'm down to around 75 now. No, that's not right. I'm down to 85. I'm up to 75 losses. Not too different. I have to be careful not to do things that I think I should be able to do. For example, I got artillery set up facing each other. They can't shoot. No orders. Same here. These guys have withdrawn. If they set up their artillery, they won't have orders. We softened up one of the two Ks, Kolarath in this case. Who's the other K guy? Kleinmeyer. Okay. So the Guard artillery and the right are the only ones that I can fire for the coalition in terms of defensive fire. Again, Napoleon's troops are on the defensive right now. As long as the other guy's willing to attack, you let him. It's probably a pretty good prescription for, because if both sides try attacking at once, you're just going to create a mess. And I'm not just talking about, it's not just because, well, the game will get messier and more confusing, but also, geez man, I want to have something I can rely on, so I don't want to launch an attack here, even if I think he's going to attack. The one exception to that is, and this is where orders don't quite work. Like, they've translated the order system from the old CWB too much to where they kind of don't work, because an enemy can sit down, park their guns, and shoot at you. I feel like a defense has to be willing to launch columns of attack against somebody who does that. At least if they're doing it within anything like close range to what you're defending. And yeah, you kind of have that by the command ranges and whatnot, which maybe that's the answer. But that answer doesn't really work when you're looking at, again, the divisional level command that the coalition has. It just doesn't work. For the French, it feels like I'm kind of violating my defensive orders to, at least by the old CWB, NBS 1 and 2 conception of what a defensive position really is. Not the default defense, which, to be fair, the real problem here is me being used to the old defensive orders, which kind of did something like hey, you can defend all of this road. Yeah, great, thanks. Whatever. But it kind of allowed you to define a territory and say you can defend it. And I kind of do a hybrid of the two, because I believe that you have to be able to give geographical defensive zones. It may also make sense to have mobile defenses. I don't know. I really don't know. But especially with Cav, it seems appropriate to be able to say something like, screen this command from getting through the valley, or something like that, where you're kind of on a point defense, where you're watching one person and trying to defend against them. That probably makes less sense than some kind of broad try to defend this huge area that you define geographically. But yeah. And those kind of commands make a lot more sense when you're not looking at the core structure. So if you have a detached division like Legrand is, where he's got some weird geographical defense and he's not really applying it, he's fallen back in a weird sort of way, I could have gotten him orders to do that. But yeah, again, where you're like looking at, is this at all, I can't stay within command, I can't be in normal command. There are penalties for not being in command that are like other games that have such penalties. But there's also like this sort of dictum that you can't voluntarily not be in command, even though the game starts off with units that are voluntarily under orders that very much allow them not to be in command. So yeah, I feel like you have to play around with the command rules and fudge them a little bit. Certainly not to the same level that you have to fudge things in Viva l'Empereur. Moving into the 10 a.m. turn, again, I'm going to finish things up with this. The French were holding Stave, Vinarade up to about here at the beginning of this day. New forces came on, but mainly all the forces from up here near the Santon Hill, from both sides, first the Russians, then the French, pushed down to position themselves for the fight. A lot of this has been about positioning, but then the attacks got launched. They swept the French back at great cost, because the casualties now are at 77 to 65. And again, on the coalition turns where they're most active, that's when they take the biggest losses. The French are kind of taking losses from artillery. It's sort of a mixed bag, but I think there's still more shots being taken and more potential for hitting by the coalition. And they have, both sides have artillery in the background that like isn't available. I have not recovered my units yet. I gotta see if there's anything that can. I don't really think there is. I've got the First Corps marked with this, but I think everything that was not in a special morale state moved. So yeah, I don't have to roll, but I want to keep that there to remind me. I'm basically keeping a reminder of the units that can recover. I mean, theoretically, Davout could. Theoretically, these guys don't need this because they don't have any casualties. But yeah, we'll remember those things, I think. All the attempts to go with a sweep through here, well, we've got a couple of remnants of this is off the original orders. This is off slightly modified orders that charged up Pratt's and then came down and attacked Koblenz, but then they got flung, and then they withdrew. And it's just too hard to get orders out that far when I have to cope with stuff all over here. I don't know. I mean, it's too hard to cope with orders when basically I can roll for initiative for the same order, maybe get it sometime when it could do me some good. You know, by the time Alexander's order gets there, and then any delay reduction happens, we might be done with this short day. And I'm talking about even when we started in the morning. It just takes so damn long for poorly communicated orders, in the wrong language perhaps, from making their way to the commands. And, you know, the command structure for the coalition and their lousy leader ratings combine to make this a nightmare to get anything coordinated without a big delay ahead of time. So overnight, you can probably get all your orders set and get them all in a row. And that's what I usually have done. And that's where the Wehrrother option kind of comes in. I may actually try this at some point with the Wehrrother, starting just on day 2, you know, straight up, not worry about that day 1 special position. Although honestly, other than the fact that I'm not rolling initiative for all my lousy officers to intervene, especially the Royals, I don't feel like I'm getting a particularly, you know, I feel like I'm getting as bad a result with the command ratings as probably the Wehrrother would get. The only problem with that is there's chances of really weird shit happening, you know, where people are going to write order. I think one of them at least writes orders, the opponent writes orders for you for a while or something. I don't really remember. It was just so cool. Let me see. Kutuzov. Okay, so you can lose Kutuzov in terms of being able to give any orders, but he's a better leader under this option. Buxhowden, if he rolls initiatives, he can give an order. If he doesn't really do too much damage. He just does his normal rolls where he's fucking you up. But if he gets a little loose cannon, he gets out of your way, which is kind of cool. Franz, when he gets initiative, he can issue an order. If he fails, he doesn't. So here's the thing. You're not likely to... You don't get loose cannons that hurt you in the same way. So there's an incentive to roll for these leaders. And I think I probably should be using that part of it at least. So Franz's initiative, well, if he gets a loose cannon, he runs for safety rather than writing an incorrect order, which is an extreme reason. Now, again, under version 1, it was worth taking that chance a lot of the time. And, you know, if I had Kutuzov in charge of the army, well, even if I didn't, I could reasonably say, hey, Franz, go over here and give some orders to Kleinmeyer. A lot harder to say, Alexander, go do this because, well, I lost Kutuzov. But also, most of the army is Russian that's engaging right now. And he is really useful just for that big morale boost. So is Franz. For Alexander, when he rolls initiative, if he fails, he can write, he can give you loose cannons. Now, the other thing is you have to roll for initiative under the Wehrwaffe. So for those 4 leaders, including Kutuzov, you have to roll initiatives, and those can work out badly for you. And yeah, I mean, you know, the loose cannon for Kutuzov is, screw this, man, I'm done. I don't want to deal. Which sucks because you don't have an army commander in this. All you have is this weird initiative system, but I really like it. However, it felt like the situation I had here is less applicable to that command situation. So I just went ahead with the standard old school rules, which, you know, create quite a bit of chaos, and you don't have the desire to roll those initiatives that can get you loose cannons from Franz and Alexander. All right, up it goes. Again, I mean, there may be a week's break before I do this. On the other hand, I'm tired. It's daylight, but I only got a couple hours of sleep. So there's also the possibility that, you know, night times are going to be cooler. Maybe I'll come back and do this at night instead of whatever I'm going to fuck around with. All right, up it goes. That was my Joe Biden voice.